Thanks for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I have with me Oscar Rodriguez. So, Oscar, if you want to give a little bit of introduction of yourself and your role, and let's get into it.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, Tony. My name is Oscar Rodriguez, and I lead our product efforts on trust at LinkedIn. Me and my team focus on keeping LinkedIn safe, trusted, and professional. Prior to LinkedIn, I've been working in this domain of trust across different online platforms and large technology companies. And so I have definitely seen the evolution of this space over the past, 10, 15 years as well.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with, I started to say this before we were recording, but like in the last 3 years, 3 to 5 years, LinkedIn has become my go-to social media platform. I mean, I've dropped Twitter. I use Facebook and Instagram less. I have picked up a couple other ones that I also don't use that, I mean, I'm on Blue Sky and things like that, so it's like, there are definitely options out there. I was on TikTok until yesterday. Deleted that app, so that one's gone. LinkedIn, so what's interesting to me though is traditionally, like if you were putting things in buckets, 5 years ago, you'd say, oh well, LinkedIn is basically where you publish your resume, and when you're looking for a job, you reach out to your network, and that's where it's just for business. And while that's still more true than other social media platforms, it also has definitely evolved, both in ways unintentional and in ways that LinkedIn is driving. Like, now when I scroll through LinkedIn, I see, the video reels. Like, LinkedIn has jumped on the reels bandwagon, except for that they're all bad. They're just, every one of those videos is just horrible. And is the kind of thing that I would argue does not belong on LinkedIn. I don't think it belongs on Facebook. I don't think it belongs on anywhere. Like they're just not good. But LinkedIn has become more social, like less business, more social. So I see people posting more personal stuff, and you get a lot of pushback. There's a lot of people on there who are trying to be the gatekeepers of LinkedIn who say, well, yeah, hey, this isn't Facebook. Take that over there, and it's like, well, you don't get to tell me what to post on, like what I want to share. From your perspective, like, what do you, how do you think that evolution is going?
All right, so thank you for that question. I mean, I'll start by telling you, I joined LinkedIn as a member way long before I worked at LinkedIn. So I have definitely, as a user, as a member, I have seen the evolution of the platform over time. But basically, going back to the purpose of what we're trying to do, is the mission is about basically supporting and creating economic opportunity for members of the global workforce, right? And so everything that we've been doing as a company essentially is in some way, shape, or form connected to that mission. When you think about what is maybe more known as the quote social media aspect of LinkedIn, right? There are a few points that I think are important for the audience to understand. One is that there is a wide range of topics that are considered professional, and that there is no single definition of professional for different people, right? Actually, we saw a big, post COVID years, there was a lot of conversations around like working at home and feeling loneliness,
right,
and childcare and some of these issues. And so definitely we saw a part of like this notion that is not just about spreadsheets and numbers and contracts, kind of like very very core professional aspects, but actually this notion of professionalism expanded to cover other aspects of professionalism. Our position on LinkedIn is that conversations belong on LinkedIn as long as they are, they don't violate our policies and they're done in a professional manner. The vision is that we want basically members to engage almost as you would engage with someone else at the office, right? In a courteous, professional manner where you debate, on the topics that are important to you, but in a way that is respectful in tone and that engages with others in, again, going back to the professional context. So that's the first thing that I would say about that evolution and what LinkedIn is known for. And again, trying to connect it to what the stuff that we're doing on trust, which is we think that trust is a key part of that. Trust in basically making sure that you understand who you're dealing with on the platform, that you understand the content that you are seeing, in the provenance of that content, given all the trends that we're seeing on AI as well.
Okay. So from a, I mean, fraud, yes, but from a the perspective of interacting on LinkedIn, like, I don't know, do you have an idea, like what is the user count ballpark?
I'm not sure about the latest figure, but we did cross the billion members on LinkedIn. I think we are a little bit past that, but I don't want to give you an inaccurate number. Okay, but it is billion plus. Let's put it at that range.
That's fine, because that's a good starting point for my point. With a billion people, it's fair to say I don't know most of them. And it's and that even the people I know, like from like a 6 degrees of separation perspective, it's like, yes, most of the people on LinkedIn are going to be people I am not directly connected with, and that my first degree connections are also not connected with. So most of them are going to be 3rd degree plus connections. So it shouldn't be unusual. But that said, what I have noticed is that when it comes to people who jump into conversations to say things that are less professional, or that seem like blatant disinformation or fraud, or that just are discourteous and disrespectful kind of comments, they're almost always 3rd plus connections. Like, like basically from an authenticity perspective, I have a high degree of confidence that the people I am connected with and the people they are connected with, so my first and second layers, are actual valid human beings. And I have this almost blanket assumption that anyone who jumps into my comments who is a 3rd level connection or lower is possibly a bot. Like 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 I said, like mathematically, I understand that that's not true. Mathematically, I understand that with a billion people on the platform, statistically, it's likely that they are human beings. But I'm just saying that, like, the comments that I end up like deleting and the people I end up blocking on LinkedIn are almost always 3rd and below.
Couple of things that I think it would be helpful to discuss here. I mean, on your point of actual human beings, this is why, again, we think of verification and all the work that we're doing about authenticity as basically decreasing the doubt that members may have in terms of who they're dealing with. We think this is an increasingly important part of any online interaction. And by the way, I'm not just talking about LinkedIn, but when you look at what we're seeing across AI, the reality is that, I mean, this new technology is making it cheaper and easier to pretend to be someone that you're not, right? And that is true on communications, that is true on video calls, that is true on email. in basically every form of digital communication, right? Like real world examples when you think about the deepfake CEO and AI clones and all this technology that is making it super easy to, with a 15-second sample of your voice to clone your voice, right? So the ability for AI to generate all these realistic and convincing personas and fake information, we think is going to be a critical layer of how we think about trust online going forward, right? Which is why for the past now 2 years, we have embarked ourselves in this journey of verifying basically every attribute of our economic graph. When you think about people, companies, jobs, we want to ensure that that over time, all of these are verified on LinkedIn. And since we started going down this path, we crossed the 100 million members verified, and about every minute, 75 more members get verified. And so going back to your point on your first and second and third degree and third degree plus connections, as we continue to get more verified members out there, the general idea is that more of that will be covered by verifications. Same for the companies or pages that you interact with. Same for the jobs that people may apply. What we want to ensure is that, again, members have that signal of credibility of like, here's who I'm engaging with. And, I know that this person is a real human or a human in the real world, as opposed to like a bot. And we believe that over time, this will be a significant, differentiator for LinkedIn as you think about how you engage with trustworthy entities online.
Okay. Well, it's like I don't know how other people. Some people are much more selective about who they connect with on a platform. I'm generally pretty open to connecting. I'm like, that's why I'm here. I'm here to connect. So I'm generally open to it, but I do basically I have like a process where like if I get a connection invite and I look at it, the first thing I'm looking at is how many mutual connections do we have? Because if it's 0, and then I have to give more thought to, okay, well, why are you reaching out to me? Like, we don't know anyone else. We have nothing in common. Like, what is this connection about? But if I look and it's like we have 30 plus, 40, 100 plus mutual connections, I basically accept that without even thinking twice, because I'm like, all right, well, if we're connected with this, 50 of the same people, there's probably a reason. And that's not, neither of those scenarios is an absolute, like it's still possible. And like I have had situations where I get an invite and I look and it says that I'm connected with, let's say we have 15 mutual connections, but I look and the mutual connections are tenuous connections in the first place for me. Like they're not like people that I really know personally, and I'm like, yeah, that's not a solid enough connection for me. Like I want it to be people I actually know and trust that are in the mutual connections. So all of that has to be kind of factored in. But you talked about like the deep fakes and AI has obviously lowered the barrier for being able to create, fake personas and such. I think fraud and scams are estimated to cost, like 60 billion annually. From, in your day to day, like how do you think about that arms race between, say, AI tools and trying to like manage trust at scale?
Absolutely. So the first thing is, as you are considering accepting an invitation, I think you're doing all the right things by looking at the profile, looking at mutual connections, doing all these things, and ultimately when you think about the work that we're doing on authenticity and verification, is precisely in the direction of giving LinkedIn members more signals of credibility, right? Things like mutual connections. Does this member account has a government ID that matches their name? Do they actually work at a particular company? All of these are signal. Recently, we actually also made mandatory that if you claim the title of a recruiter working for one of these companies that is eligible, that it is mandatory that you verify actually that you work at that company. So all of these things are, again, getting at that in that direction of empowering members with more signals for this is a connection, and then to helping them make informed decisions about how they want to engage with. One of the things that we see is different types of engagement require different levels of signal, right? And Tony, I think you were saying like, hey, when I'm accepting a connection request, it may be that the bar for that is, you do a little bit of due diligence, and then you basically decide to accept or decline. Now, if the interaction is, say, in the context of a partnership or a job or an investment opportunity, the due diligence for that should correspondingly be much higher because the stakes of that interaction are also significantly higher, right? And so this is the type of signal that we want to create as you basically do that due diligence to understand, like, okay, this person is saying they're a recruiter, they're asking me to submit, my CV, or they're asking me to go and apply to this website where they require some personal information. And then, I can actually look at their profile and look that they actually work at this company, that the page is verified. And this is the type of member journey that we want to enable. Is again, like allowing you to do that due diligence and be able to make informed decision about the type of interaction that you want to have.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the verification, like that, there is a strong thing. Anyway, it's a strong signal.
Yeah.
When it's legitimate verification, which I think LinkedIn's is, and I'm gonna highlight Twitter because like at one point Twitter's was as well. But once you once you open it up and you say, okay, well, if you just give us some money, we'll consider you verified. I'm like, well, that's not verification then. That's a whole different thing. That's not, you didn't verify anything.
Absolutely. One thing that, and again, I can speak to the approach that Twitter has taken, but one of the constraints or one of the principles behind how we thought about verification is we wanted to make sure that it was basically freely available to members and that it wasn't something that you could simply buy, and that, everything that was verified was transparent to the viewer. And so, if it's your government ID, if it's your work email, like, again, we want to be very transparent about what was verified, when and how, and we want to make sure that it's freely available. And actually, members who go through this process get some real gains in terms of like interactions with others. Like we see, for instance, that about 60 verified members get about 60% more profile views. They get more connection requests, about 30%. Their posts also get more engagement, about 50%, and they get more emails from recruiters as well. And I think it's worth clarifying, none of this is actually because we have encoded it somewhere that a verified member gets more of these things. Is because this is how the platform is reacting, right? And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you get 2 invitation requests One is from a verified account, one is from an unverified account. It tends to be that people are looking for that verification badge as a signal of trust. It makes it more that they're more likely to accept, they're more likely to engage with
Right.
that member as well.
Especially in a situation that fails my first test. Like if it's someone that I have 50 mutual connections with, like I said, that's pretty much automatic. If it falls below 30 mutual connections, I'm going to look a little more closely, and at that point, like, and even if we have 0 connections, that's not I'm not going to absolutely reject that. I'm just gonna look harder. And one of the things I will look for is, is this person verified? And I'll look through their profile history, and because a lot of things, and this is not absolute. These are all like broad strokes that I'm painting with. But if I look at a connection and it's a LinkedIn profile that was created last month and there's no employment history and whatever, I'm like, no. I think maybe no. And maybe that's a legitimate person. I mean somebody's got to join LinkedIn at some point. So it just because their account's new doesn't mean that it's fraudulent. Just because they don't have a 20-year employment history doesn't mean that it's fraudulent. But those are all signals. They're all signals that contribute to my calculus.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really fair point in regards to, ultimately, we also want to make it easier for people that might be just breaking into an industry, right? Or people that are new to the professional world, or people that are in their first job or switching industries, that this doesn't count against them. The fact that, hey, I'm trying to break into the InfoSec world, and I don't know, previously I was working as an administrative assistant and I got my certification and now I'm ready to break in, and we don't have, and ultimately we also want to make sure that members like this can or have an opportunity to verify the information about their profile and to reach out and make connections and and again, get to know about an industry. One of the things, and maybe I'm going back to your first question earlier today about the social media side of LinkedIn, the quote social media side. But one of the things that we also want to make it is for members to come to LinkedIn and understand what people in their industry are talking about, right? This is part of the evolution from like a quote job board, the origins of LinkedIn, to where LinkedIn is today. Is we along that journey realized that professional context about the industry, the people, the type of lingo that they use, the topics that they're talking about, is an important aspect of staying in touch with your industry, of understanding how a particular segment of an industry, be it InfoSec or finance or legal, how they're speaking to each other, how the types of conversations that they're having is actually an important part of staying relevant in the context of professionalism as well.
Right. Well, and to kind of veer that way for a minute, one of the things that I think about when I think about LinkedIn, and I think about this with companies as well, like you take a publicly traded corporation, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. So they're making decisions through that lens, and sometimes those decisions aren't that great for the community. They aren't that great for the world. They might be great for the shareholder, not that great for the world. And my perspective on that has always been, we needed to have and I don't know how you would phrase this and how you would enforce this, but there needs to be a caveat on there that says you have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value within the bounds of the greater good. And the reason I say that, and I'll bring this back to LinkedIn, is ultimately the company exists in a community. Like it's not in a vacuum. It's not a completely separate entity. It is made up of people who live in society, and so like those people have to drive on the roads and drink the water and all the other things. And it's like, so if the corporation is doing things that harm the community, they are in effect harming themselves. Like it actually does contribute to shareholder value ultimately to do the right thing, or at least it should. And I will say the same thing. So for LinkedIn, I am bringing it back to LinkedIn. As it has become more social and different conversations happen, and I do see, people trying to, gate check and police people's, like, and say, well, that doesn't seem like a, this site is only for posting your resume. We don't want to hear your opinion on blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, no, because yes, I am a professional journalist, infosec professional, whatever. I'm also a human being, and so like, things happen, like whether it's the weather, whether it's politics, whether it's my pets, whether it's my family, like all of those things are part of who I am, and they're all fair game to an extent. Going back to your original framing of it, I would say that, like, yes, LinkedIn, is a more, by definition, it's a more professional network. And like, so like, even when you delve into personal posts, it's through a different lens than you might see on like a Facebook. Although I would argue that Facebook also shouldn't be doing like Facebook. Like, like there are, even on Facebook, there are things that like you probably shouldn't be posting. So maybe Facebook should emulate LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And again, for me, it is, or the stance that we take as a company is conversations and topics belong on LinkedIn as long as they don't violate our policies and they are really about the tone and the types of conversations are professional. To your point about being human, you're a human first, a professional as well. Right. Second, and then those, like where your life outside of work and your life at work basically come together. We believe that some of those conversations belong on LinkedIn as long as they're having in a professional manner. However, again, like as we think about what we're trying to do with authenticity, one of the key signals that we want to do or to give people is also this notion of who is credible to talk about a particular topic, right? If you go and check out my LinkedIn profile, you would know that I have zero background in anything related to, farming. But with AI, I could be posting, somewhat eloquently, this notion of, anything related to farming. Ultimately, what we want to empower members is to be able to understand, okay, who's credible to speak about this professional topic based on the professional conversations that they have had and the topics that they have posted in their network and the companies that they have worked, and to make decisions about the credibility of a particular individual. The other piece is also, we want to, going back to your question about the industry and companies, and we want to make it easier for other companies to also, lean or rely on this trust infrastructure that we have set up so far. Again, the underlying assumption is trust and authenticity will become increasingly important in any type of digital communication. And so in addition to basically being able to showcase some of the signals on LinkedIn itself, we are partnering with other companies, with Adobe, with Zoom, where members are actually able to port some of these credentials to other platforms as well.
You're getting ahead of me. That was so. My next question was, I was actually going to talk about the verified on LinkedIn, and so yes, I mean, so you've taken the concept of verified, and extended it, and extended that the trust beyond LinkedIn, like you said, with Zoom and Adobe. Does that seem like something that is kind of an early indicator of being able to create a broader portable trust layer for the internet? I know like LinkedIn isn't necessarily trying. I mean, maybe you are. I was gonna say LinkedIn isn't necessarily trying to be in the business of being like the arbiter of all authenticity, but it is a good metric. It is a good, like if you are verified on LinkedIn, then it does make sense for Zoom to say, okay, well, we'll take that.
As we think about, again, maybe the why we're doing this is we have realized that for members, they also are facing this challenge elsewhere of, hey, I want to, I don't know, be eligible for a work-related discount, but I have to go and prove in this website that I actually work at this company. Or I want to join a Zoom call, or I want to join a video call. And, there is this essentially what I would call like this trust tax across the internet, right? Where you have to go as an internet user and likely have to go and prove your authenticity across a number of different sites. And it can be for something like a publisher discount for a subscription, or a work eligible perk, like I want to buy a phone, and if I work at company X, I get a 20% discount. All of these things are, have the potential to be abused or misused. Right. And therefore, for a LinkedIn member, basically having the portability of saying, I'm already verified on LinkedIn, I can bring this to other platforms, to other companies, so that I don't have to have that friction all over again at different, in different platforms or different sites on the internet. And also for companies, again, we started going down this path with the assumption of like, hey, this is going to be important for LinkedIn. But one of the things that we have realized is that, LinkedIn, the platform, is not alone in terms of authenticity becoming increasingly important. And this is where some of the partnerships with Adobe, with Zoom, with other partners that we have in the pipeline have come into play. Is this realization of like, oh, this is actually a helpful signal for us too, in how can we enable members and obviously with their consent, bringing it over to other websites so that they can reduce that friction elsewhere as well.
Okay. No, I mean, I think it makes sense. Let's bring this back a little bit to the kind of like your day-to-day in terms of fraudulent accounts or harmful interactions on the site. So like general data, general metrics seem to suggest that the interactions are more likely to harmful interactions are more likely to come from outside your network. I mean, like going back to my thing, like the people who are my first level connections and my second level connections probably are probably not going to be reaching out trying to like scam me. But those third level interactions, the possibility goes up significantly. And a lot of times those conversations, when they happen in, either in comments or in messages that are sent, DMs, they try to move the conversation off platform. Like they want you to, like, well, let's take this conversation over here. how do you guys deal with that? How does that shape, your decisions in terms of friction and visibility and protecting users?
So, I mean, if there is one thing that I would love your audience to take away from this as it relates to interactions, is what we're trying to do is to give you, LinkedIn members, the signals that you need in order to, kind of like trust your gut as it relates to an interaction, right? Uh, it is true that the more out of network an interaction is, the more unknown, someone could be. It is also true that sometimes some of those opportunities come from outside your network as well. So, it can cut both ways. Obviously, when you have, when you know somebody that knows somebody, you can always check references. You can always say, hey, Bob, do you know about Alice who works at X? And then Bob might say, oh, yeah, I work with Alice. She's great. The further you go out of your network, the less possibility you have of doing that kind of like due diligence. And this is where, we want to step in by giving you those signals to understand how things are working through. A lot of what we're trying to do, bringing it back to the day-to-day, is basically productizing the signals across these different interactions. And so, for instance, when you first receive a connection request, we are prominently exhibiting verification badges on those invitation requests. When, say, you accept the connection request and now you start an exchange on basically on LinkedIn messaging about a particular opportunity, say a partnership, right? What we want to do is give members throughout their interaction the confidence to understand. For instance, if there is we have an optional harmful setting detection messages where members can opt in, and we will give them a warning if we think that could potentially be leading to a scam. We also, for instance, we prominently display if you're navigating away from LinkedIn to an unknown URL. And so the general idea is that throughout all of these interactions, we want to give you clues of, hey, this is, we want to make sure that all of this information is fully transparent and that members are in a position to make an informed decision about the interaction.
Okay. What are you seeing? I mean, obviously, in the last few years, we have had this explosion of, generative AI, and on the security side or whatever. Like, the conversation has switched primarily to agentic AI, but from a generative AI, like I can use that to, like you talked about, like I can pretend to be an expert in farming. I can pretend to be an expert in whatever. And I can also use it to generate video. I can use it to generate images, so being able to tell like what's real and what's not is obviously more complicated. How are you, what are you seeing with that in terms of like AI generated fraud, whether it's images or text, and how is LinkedIn handling that from like a trust perspective?
I mean, maybe I'll speak to this from the job side and what we're seeing actually in terms of what companies are hiring for on LinkedIn, right? I'm happy to go back to how we approach it on the platform. But I mean, one of the things that we definitely see is that as it gets easier to fake all this expertise, to create entire personas with voice and video and all of these things, that on LinkedIn jobs data, background investigator is actually one of the fastest growing roles in the US market, right? Alongside with roles in cybersecurity specialists, chief risk officers. And so this trend basically reflects just the fact that we have entered this era where growing security threats and a rising demand for this type of trust-related expertise, right? Or be it on cybersecurity, be it on more of this like background investigators. Um, Background investigator is now ranking as the number 15, position being hired for, with I believe almost a 25% growth rate over the past 3 years. And so again, increasingly becoming like a core role that is being used to verify identity, credentials, and trust for processes like hiring as well. And this is not just limited to the US. It is a pattern that we see globally as well. LinkedIn publishes these jobs on the RISE list, and you will see that risk prevention roles, it basically appears in many of these lists, in 5 out of the 12 countries where we publish it. And so again, that reflects like an interesting trend that we're seeing in terms of what companies come to hire on LinkedIn for as well.
Well, it's interesting. I did not connect these dots myself, but following the pandemic, in the last year or two, there've been more and more companies pushing for return to office, and saying, well, we want people back at their desk, and for the most part, I'm on the side that says, yeah, no, you shouldn't do that. Don't do that. just people are working remote, it's fine. And I always viewed it from the perspective of that the company just wanted to have draconian control over people, or just that they're trying to justify that, they're locked into a lease that they're paying for the office anyway, so you may as well make sure that people are using it. A few months back, someone pointed out to me that there is an element of what you were just talking about that's part of it too, which is as there's been this rise of North Korean threat actors who have infiltrated into remote positions and stuff, that if I make you come into the office and sit at a desk, you can't be fraudulent. So it's like, I was like, all right, I can understand. I actually understand that more. That seems to me to be a more valid argument. I'm not sure that that's still the best or only way to solve that problem, but at least it makes some sense.
Without injecting myself into the work from home or return to office conversation, we do, for instance, on LinkedIn try to make it very easy for recruiters to understand who's a verified account and what we have verified about them, right? And obviously, there is an aspect to what you're saying of hey, the fact that you're coming into the office and I see you every day and I can physically tap you in the shoulder, I know that you're real. I know that you're based in the US and all of these things. And so, again, we on LinkedIn try to make it easier for companies to understand verification status for things like job applicants and and such. But also, I think it's important to, and again, this aspect of what we're seeing in terms of data and hiring reflects that there is a growing appetite to making sure that you're dealing with authentic candidates and authentic employees on the internet as well.
Okay. I know we're starting to come up on time, and I could probably go another hour really, but one of the things I wanted to touch on is, verification as it stands, or at least my understanding of as it stands, is a point in time interaction. Yes, I went through the steps to get verified on LinkedIn, and so I'm verified. Some things change though. So how do you, is verification just a point in time thing, like a one-off thing, or is it something that should be periodically or continually assessed to ensure that you're still verified? basically like looking forward, what does that look like for the platform and trying to balance kind of confidence and trust?
So again, as we think about the vision for verification of LinkedIn, is that eventually every entity, and I speak about members, pages, jobs, recruiters, are verified on LinkedIn, right? And we started down this journey 2 years ago. For members in particular, we have two types of verifications available today, and we are continuously looking at other alternatives. We're trying to optimize for global coverage as well. Those two types are ID verification and work email verification. As you think about, what's durable, what should be re-verified, identity tends to be obviously more durable, right? Like the fact that, I know that the name on your profile matches a name on a government ID is, something that presumably could be true for the rest of your life, right? There are some exceptions,
Right.
You may change your name for a variety of different reasons, at which point we require re-verification if that is the attribute about yourself that you verified, okay?
Okay.
So say if someone gets married or changes their name, or there's a myriad of circumstances that tend to lean down that path. But again, we want to make sure that the name that is displayed on your profile matches that of the government ID that at some point you verified. The other is more of a point in time verification, which is basically work email verification. Is the fact that at some point you claim to work at this company and you actually had an email address that matches the domain for that company, and that email address can only be used once per profile, right? Because we want to make sure that people can gain verification, and we keep a very close eye to ensure that verified accounts are actually far less likely to be doing anything that is actually a signal of trust on LinkedIn. That is a point-in-time verification that we currently don't require to re-verify, because what we're attesting is the fact that you at some point had an email address that was, say, Microsoft.com, which is
Right.
typically one that is reserved for employees of a firm. And one of the interesting aspects that we're seeing now 2 years into this journey is the fact that members, as they change jobs, they actually re-verify at their new employer. So you might change job from company A to company B, and then you go and so we are already starting to see this trend of, it will be possible for someone to have their entire professional work history verified, which again is a great signal if you're on the hiring side, because then you can see, oh, I see Tony, verify their older 5 positions, and that gives me a ton of confidence as a hirer. The fact that I'm dealing with an authentic person, and that they actually had these roles at these different companies.
Okay.